The path of an artist is full of challenges, which has pushed me to reach out to other professionals about their experiences. Join us as we explore the journeys of fine artists who have turned their passion of creating art into a profession. From their highs to their hurdles, these are real insights, breakthroughs, and triumphs to inspire other creators to reach higher. Welcome to the Business of Art Podcast. Welcome back to the Business of Art Podcast today, guys. Thank you so much for listening in. And today we are thrilled to have Lindsey Kustusch with us out of Salem, Oregon. Lindsey, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me. This is so exciting.
Yeah, so excited, so thrilled. So I'm going to just read a couple points from her bio, and then we're going to hear her journey. So Lindsey has been a professional fine artist since 2009. She is based in the United States, and most of that time has been in the Bay Area of California, roughly about 12 years, I think. And then she actually moved to London for 3 years. And now she is back in the States in Salem, Oregon with her husband, Nate Ross, who is also another professional artist. She has been exhibiting her artwork in galleries nationwide since 2009. She loves connecting with like-minded people through her workshops and online courses. She's extremely passionate about capturing moments in life, particularly city life and kind of that gritty, city living, and the diverse world of plants and animals. She specializes in animal portraiture and plein air painting. And currently she is getting all set up to have a 2-person show at the Principal Gallery in Alexandria, Virginia. She'll also be showing with her husband, which is pretty cool. And that's coming in November. I think November 8th is the show opening. So that's not a whole lot, but we're expecting you to fill in some gaps here, Lindsey. Thanks again so much for being here. Please tell us your journey. We want to hear, how things started for you when you were young and how that's developed and all the fun stuff till now.
I love it. Sounds good. I'm going to try to not draw it out too much, but I'll try to hit the big points.
Yeah. Go as in depth as you'd like. We're all ears.
Sounds great. So I'd say, since I was little, I've always loved art. I feel like if I would really think about it, it was the one thing that I connected to the most was drawing and coloring and just kind of having always like pencil and paper in front of me. And animals. Honestly, those were always kind of my 2 biggest connections. So I remember when I was little thinking I either want to be an artist or a vet, because those are the 2 things that you could be if you liked both of those,
Yeah.
So as I got older, I started just to connect more with art because I realized, I think it was the challenge of it too, of I had a little bit of talent with it, but at the same time it was so hard. And anytime you'd make any sort of like big improvements, it was so rewarding. It was everything. So decided that like somehow I wanted to kind of pursue this. So I actually went to art school in Chicago to start out with at a school called the American Academy of Art. And it was a really small art school. And then about halfway through, I heard of the Academy of Art in San Francisco, and I'm like, I want to move to California. So I actually just left my school in Chicago, transferred my credits over, and then came out to California, and that's when I started kind of my journey in San Francisco at the Academy of Art.
Okay.
So then at that point, I was just kind of bouncing around from, I don't even know, I was trying everything, illustration, graphic design. I think I even did fashion for like a semester, just thinking maybe this is something I wanted to do. And I was there for a few more years. And at that point, I wasn't any closer to kind of figuring out what I wanted to do or could do, I think, with art. I was just taking a lot of classes. And it just so happened that I had an opportunity to move and moved to the Big Island of Hawaii with my family to basically just kind of take some time and just kind of figure out what I'm going to do. My mom just kind of decided she was going to buy a coffee farm, and I'm like, I'll come out and help you with that.
Wow.
And so, yeah, so we went out there, and at that point, I just started working for the Humane Society. So I got really deep into animals and nature and kind of left art completely. And for years, I was there for a while and then came back to San Francisco. And really, I started working at another shelter in San Francisco. And yeah, and it wasn't until like a few years later where I actually started painting again and started drawing. And it was years after school where I think I found my actual love for painting and art in general. And I guess just kind of drive and motivation. You know, it's hard sometimes to go from high school right into college and go like this, at least for somebody like me, like this is my plan, this is what I want to do, but then still have the same, to find the drive. You know, you need some sort of motivator that's like kicking you into gear. Yeah. And so for me, a full-time job with animals, thinking this is what I wanted to do, and then halfway through realizing I really, really, really want to see what I can do with art. And I feel like I need to start that again. And so crazy enough, I had a coworker who was already a pretty established artist in San Francisco at the time. And he introduced me to a gallery in San Francisco. It's called Studio Gallery. And let me just take a quick sip of water here.
Yeah, you're good.
Okay, cool. So a coworker of mine introduced me to a gallery in San Francisco called Studio Gallery, and I went and showed them just like a few of my little like paintings that I had made. So like at that point, I really didn't know what I wanted to paint. I didn't have any reference. I wasn't sure kind of like where I wanted to go. So I just started photographing the animals at the shelter. And painting basically their portraits, thinking if anything I can maybe help them get adopted, and then just have these paintings on the side, you know. And then I think there was actually maybe a silent auction that we did to promote the shelter, and I painted a bunch of portraits and put them in the auction to promote. And I think that was like my first, I'd say like gig to like finish, you know, and complete a bunch of paintings and then like put them in front of a bunch of other strangers to have eyes looking at your work, you know? And so it was like I remember that being a huge deal. So from there, I had a bunch of like just little paintings I did with my cats of the animals at the shelter, and I brought them over to Studio Gallery. They took a look at them and asked me if I wanted to join their Small Works kind of holiday show that happened, you know, around the holidays, which at some point we can get into. I feel like that's such a great gateway and introduction into galleries for emerging artists because, it's not a big commitment. It's all tiny. It's not a big commitment for the gallery. It's not a big commitment for you, but you can kind of get a sense of like if this gallery is someone you want to work with, if it's, you know, potentially if you can sell work there, and you know, how successful it really is. Yeah. And so I put a few paintings in, and I mean, I think at that point I charged maybe $50 a painting. I mean, it was under 100, you know, and it was like, it was everything, you know, and I had like, basically it was just like, mostly just my two cats. I had them kind of like wrestling together and sitting together and like very abstract, put them in there, and they sold. And so, of course, because they were like $50, you know.
Right. Right. Steal.
Totally. But then they asked me back for other group shows. And so I just started saying yes, basically, to any time they asked me, like, do you want to join the Cityscape show? Do you want to do animals? Like, we have a show that's just about food and still lives. And I'm like, yes, yes, yes. I don't know how to do it, but I'll try it and I'll see what I can do. And so I just basically started there and just kind of kept giving them work anytime they threw an invite out to me.
Yeah.
And so then like I started to kind of get slightly established with them, I'd say over like the next year or so.
Mm-hmm.
And from there, this was well before social media, where you could promote yourself in any other way besides like going to a gallery or sending emails over with images, those kinds of things. So I actually printed out some business cards and spent weeks just walking around San Francisco, literally going to galleries and passing out my card and just introducing myself, showing them my work, and just hoping to just land one more. And I happened to get a gallery interested that was like right in the heart of San Francisco in like the Union Square area. And they wanted to try out a few pieces, and it was perfect timing and like a perfect location to have a lot of people see my work and a lot more galleries see the work that's at that gallery and those kinds of things. And it kind of just spiraled from there. Like it kind of not spiraled, snowballed from there, where I had other galleries contact me to see if I wanted to try a few pieces there, and then just kind of felt my way along and just kept going with it. So truly, like before this, painting like fine art for a gallery was never ever something I thought I could do, wanted to do, thought was even like an option to sustain, like to have a sustainable living. I just, you hear of all other like types of jobs where it's like education, absolutely, art teacher, some sort of digital art, some sort of illustration career. And this was I'm just going to feel it out as I go. And then it kind of started to blossom into something that I really could keep building on. And that's kind of how it all started. And it's been 15 years since that all began. It's wild.
Yeah. That is so cool. What a neat way to, and every time I interview people, I'm just blown away at how it evolves and how it comes about. And I definitely think that one of the commonalities that I see a lot is that mindset where it's like, I didn't even think that this was something that I could do, to really make a living, know, and, we kind of have that stigma of the starving artist kind of pounded into our brains, even just culturally, I think, who's actually a successful artist that makes a living selling fine art, right?
Yeah, exactly. And or it's like you hear of like just the the ones that can sell one painting a year for, $50,000, $100,000. And you're like, oh, okay, that's never going to be a possibility. So why try,
Yeah, absolutely.
It's either the starving artist or like the polar opposite. And I think that's why it never even crossed my mind. And I think even growing up, I didn't really go to a lot of galleries. I mean, it definitely, of course you went to your occasional museum, but I wasn't like that sort of culture wasn't pushed into my kind of day-to-day yearly life, So it really wasn't until I moved to a bigger city that was just bursting at the seams with culture and galleries and other artists and those kinds of things, and art schools too. So where they introduced you to these places is when I actually even occurred to me that this could be something I could even do. So it's wild.
Yeah, that's so cool. So as you're talking about your education experience, you started in Chicago. What was the academy called again?
It was called the American Academy of Art.
Okay.
It has no with the Academy of Art, but they just happen to share a similar name.
Yeah. So can you tell us a little bit about what that was like, and then and the differences between that academy versus the one in San Francisco?
Yeah. Oh my God. Huge differences. So that one was super small. It was literally just 2 floors in a high-rise office building in San Francisco. That was it. And they focused on mostly illustration, and a lot of big illustrators have actually come out of there.
So was that Chicago or San Francisco?
That was Chicago. Yeah.
Okay. Sorry. Okay. Thank you. Yeah.
That was Chicago. So that was the American Academy of Art. Smaller. Yeah. Only a couple floors worth in a single building, versus the Academy of Art in San Francisco. They have kind of locations all over the city, and there's thousands and thousands and thousands of students, you know?
Wow. Okay.
So it was like definitely big fish in a small pond going to teeny tiny itty bitty microscopic fish into a gigantic pond,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
Which, so honestly, I'm really happy that I randomly it happened that way, where like I got my confidence up a little bit with my smaller school, you know, and kind of found some, you know, worked on my fundamentals and like got more confidence in my skill before I moved over to the Academy of Art, where there's a million students and everyone's better than you, and like was able to kind of find my way there. But really, I have to say, I mean, I was only there for like another 2 years before I left to go kind of do an adventure. So I'm an art school dropout is really what it comes down to.
Hey guys, I want to take a really quick second and tell you a little bit about the Business of Art course that we've been working on. The Business of Art is a comprehensive online course that teaches all about how to create art effectively. We've included some really great business tools like my painting price calculator, which allows you to quickly and intuitively price your work. It's the same calculator that I've been using for years, and it has saved me a ton of time. We have an entire section on how to create effective compositions using Photoshop. And we also go through my entire painting process, starting from prepping my panels all the way to varnishing and framing. Right now, we're currently offering the course at 60% off because there's a lot more content to come. So everyone who signs up will be getting full lifetime access to all the content we've already created, plus everything else that's going to be coming along with other benefits and discounts. We also have a full 30-day money-back guarantee. So if you don't find the value you're looking for, we'll give you a full refund. I really hope you'll go and check out the Business of Art. The link's down below. Yeah.
Yeah.
So how beneficial would you say was that educational experience for you now, looking back?
Yeah. And I've thought about this because I get this question a lot, and I'm like, I feel like, of course, I learned some, you know, drawing foundation and how to work with oil paint altogether, because I never had done that before that. Certain things, but I mean, really, it wasn't until after, when I just started dabbling on my own, even with acrylic, because I didn't even jump back into oil after art school. I just started with an easier medium and, or I guess less complicated medium. And worked with acrylic and found painting just through literally hours and hours and hours and hours of just in my studio or in my apartment. Really, I didn't even have a studio at that point. And self-taught. It was just, my husband says it's like the school of hard knocks. That was it. That was
right.
Like, you know, yeah, like, it was really me just trying it out, maybe going to a gallery, seeing other artwork in person, and then coming back home, getting inspired, figuring out, and just experimenting. And I remember at that point when I was really pushing myself to learn how to paint, there was this other gallery that had popped up in my neighborhood in San Francisco, and it had I think it was just a gallery that showed it was just a single artist in that gallery at that point, because I don't remember really anybody else's work coming through there. And it was very expressionistic, more abstract. I mean, there was, of course, like the fundamentals, like the foundation was there in order for these to have some sort of structure. But at that point, since, you know, I was so new, I didn't see that. All I saw was expression and color and everything that I guess I wasn't taught at art school, or like you're not allowed to kind of play with, because you're trying to figure out how to even like mix paint and like get it to stick on the canvas, you know, like I get it,
Yeah.
you know, like you're not ready to just kind of throw paint around. And so when I saw that, I was like, it just kind of like broke my brain. I'm like, I didn't know that this was even possible with oil paint. And that's truly, I think, when I just got this like big burst of inspiration, and I wanted to just try to like just have more fun with it and see what I could do. And so my work started out, if I were to show my very, very, very earliest paintings, I mean, it was just expression and heart, you know, and then kind of the skill came later. Like that came with me learning how to do perspective and, you know, that kind of composition and line and everything that comes with it just by doing it over and over and over and over again. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So in looking at your bio information, it talks a lot about some of the plein air painting that you do. How has that shaped your work, and when did that kind of come into play?
So that, I'd say, when I was living in San Francisco, I think I started dabbling with it then. I was working after I decided that this was kind of what painting was something that I wanted to do more full time, not necessarily quit my full time job yet, but do it more seriously. I got a studio space at like an art collective, you know, kind of communal art studio space, I guess.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
Yeah. And from there I met a lot of other artists. And then, at that point, I think that's when I went out for the first time to go and try, you know, like painting outside. And it's like, it's so hard. It's like it's the hardest way to paint. And I remember going like, this is too crushing for my ego right now. Like, and I didn't know that that's what that was, but I'm like, no, I can't paint outside. I can't get anything, you know? Yeah. And so I tried it a little bit and then basically came back to the studio. And then that's just where I decided, like, this is where I'm going to be. This is where I'm going to paint. And then I think a few years later, really, like, Nate, my husband, he absolutely loves painting outside. And so he was the one that really was like, just at least just come out with me and just do it again. I'm like, yeah, okay, fine. I'll come out. I'll do it. It'll be a beautiful day. And then it was like, I realized like what plein air painting is something entirely different from studio painting. You actually get to see everything in real life. So you're seeing real color, real light, what light does in like a landscape, you know, versus what a photograph is showing you back home when you bring it, you know, put it on your computer or print it out, depending. And so immediately it's like I could see the benefits of going out and at least just observing and just like giving an attempt, you know? Yeah. And then let alone trying to actually make anything that looks somewhat what you're looking at, you know? But then like the more I did it too, the more I realized it's like, it's been so beneficial for me to jump out of my comfort zone and paint, let's say, more alla prima, which is mostly plein air painting, versus studio painting where you have, like, I paint mostly in layers, let a layer dry before I add paint on top, and I kind of flip back and forth that way. So it was a way to get out and practice alla prima. It was a way to get out and see light and form and how it really is. And it's really like, it's so challenging, but the challenge of it, no matter how it turns out, once you realize that like these probably aren't going to be masterpieces most of the time, like it's some of my work that I'm like the most proud of because it was such a challenge. And the fact that like it's like halfway decent, I'm like, this is something I want to keep doing, you know, because this is amazing. Like, even though that's like, I would never show anybody most of the time what those paintings are, you know? So anyway, so I started kind of dabbling with that, and I try to do that as often as I can. Like recently we took a trip in Oregon, and we went to a couple really beautiful spots, like a spot on the coast and then a spot in the Columbia Gorge where like it's just this opens up into this gorgeous kind of landscape. And we painted for about a week, like just a couple different spots, and brought it home, and then did some kind of art challenges at home to finish out our painting week. But so anyways, I do that when I can, but mostly paint inside in my studio.
That's awesome. So looking at your work, you have beautiful cityscapes I see a lot of, and then you've got your animal work. And so how do you balance between the two different subjects in your work? Do you have specific shows that have themes? I'm just curious how that all plays together.
Yeah, well, really, like, kind of how that started was originally when I was asked for when I was invited into these group shows. They were so kind of random and all over the place. It really unknowingly gave me this kind of opportunity to paint a bunch of different subjects with like a purpose at the end of it too. You know, like it's a cityscape show, so I have to figure out like what is my take on a cityscape? How do you even paint a cityscape? But I'm going to say yes because I want to make this happen. I want to be in this gallery.
Yeah.
I'm just going to try it, and see how it goes. So, like, I painted, they had animal shows, cityscape shows, like I was saying before, a bunch of these different types of themes. So it started that way. And then living in San Francisco, as I started to kind of, I guess, really like see cityscape painting for the first time, like seeing that either a show at a gallery or other artists that were doing it, it was like that became like the ultimate challenge for me to like get good at or try to get good at or make it at least look cool, like this is it. So I started I kind of went full on into cityscape painting and really didn't dabble with a lot of other subjects for a little while, but then realized that cityscape painting, as much as there are, organic forms that kind of come in, like the landscape within it, it's very much more rigid. It's all about perspective. There's a lot of straight lines, and it's painting a scene versus painting like a single subject too. Yeah. And I just really missed that type of painting. So I started photographing birds and those kinds of things and just trying to kind of like, in a sense, incorporate it into my cityscape theme. So like ravens and crows. Ravens are all over San Francisco and they're enormous. And it became like such a passion of mine. So like that's what I started. I went to the beach and photographed them. And so really now it's kind of this balance of, I usually have a few cityscape paintings going on that usually have more layers, I need more time in between the layers to kind of think out the steps and the process and that kind of thing. And then we'll have a couple different kind of more organic shaped, paintings going on. So birds, animals, those types of things in the drawing rack that I kind of flip back and forth on, really to keep it fresh. And then also, I guess the choice is based on really more what I'm feeling that week. I mean, but at the same time, obviously, if I were to be honest, it is a lot of times I will try and theme a show with like a certain subject, or if I'm painting for a group show that has a certain subject, I'll be doing that mostly. So, but this last few years, I've been painting more and more animals only because I think maybe because I moved out of San Francisco and it wasn't in my face every day and how beautiful that city is, because you turn the corner and like, it's just like, this would make the perfect painting. And I was moving all over the place. And so I think I found animals to be just more of a passion, because I was able to kind of either find images on the internet, or take my own, that kind of thing. And I decided for the first time, it was like a couple years ago, I had yet to do a show that was all animals. And there was something that was stopping me for the longest time to fully committing to animals. And I don't know, I couldn't figure out really what that was. Maybe I think it had a lot to do with the fact that I was painting a lot of cityscapes, they were selling, and I try to like kind of theme, or I try to like paint for shows where certain subjects I know have a history of selling. I'll paint a certain number of those and then do some experimental pieces, those kinds of things. Yeah. And I would always do like a few birds or a few animals. And I decided finally, I'm like, I'm just going to try and commit and just do a full show, full animals, and just see how it goes. And that was 2 years ago at a gallery in Denver called Bend Gallery. And I did other animals besides birds. And I didn't realize like what a big deal that was actually for kind of my growth too, to not have Cityscapes be the kind of identity, in a way.
Yeah.
It's interesting how that happens. And I have to say, like, I'm not sure if it's like, there are a lot of like my journey too. It's like, there's a part where you want to be, of course, you want to be taken seriously. You want to like show that like, I can do this. I know how to do this. I'm still learning, but this is something that I'm passionate about.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking like, animals, if I paint animals, I won't be taken as seriously for some reason. And so Cityscapes kind of had this like bigger impact, and I got fixated on that too. In a weird way. And maybe it's, and I hate to even say this, but maybe because I'm female, it's like, there's something that's like, oh, you paint flowers or you paint animals or, but I'm like,
right.
no, I paint dark, rainy cityscapes. Like that's what I love. That's what's awesome.
Yeah.
Anyway, so it's been this kind of, in a weird way too, like a personal journey and a personal growth to kind of say like, I love all of it. I love animals. I love cityscapes. I love painting all of it. And I'm hoping that the more I do it and the more I show that these are the things that I, that I have to basically put out there, that hopefully sales will come. And if not, you just kind of, you twist and turn depending on like where it's going to go. But I think that was a very roundabout way to answer your question. Sorry about that.
No, I love it. And it shows how there's so many mental aspects to being an artist and so many, I think, barriers that we place in our own lives. And it's crazy kind of the mental game that this really is. And it's funny because it's like, maybe you had an experience with a professor who thought that painting animals was less than painting something like a landscape or a cityscape. And that's kind of stuck with you for a long time.
I'm sorry.
Okay. What I was saying was, maybe you had a professor who talked poorly about painting animals or you had this barrier just from a one-off experience that's kind of stuck with you and been a roadblock and kind of kept you stuck in that mindset.
Yes. So. It is amazing how like those subtle interactions, or even sometimes big interactions, like, really unconsciously like shape kind of the directions that you go. And it takes a lot of reflection too, to realize like, oh, that's kind of the direction I went because of these things. Really also because of a lot of other, obviously, things that went into it. But maybe it started because this was the thing that really like made an impact, like for my career or for the gallery, or had the biggest reaction or something like that, It's wild how that's kind of, it does shape you in a way, Yeah,
it's interesting. So I, being an animal painter, a wildlife and domestic animals, and I've always gravitated toward your animal stuff. And yeah, I think it's phenomenal. It's beautiful work.
Thank you.
So I have a question. I know I see you do a lot of these butterfly paintings. Mm-hmm. They're just phenomenal.
Thank you.
I don't know how you can paint so many, and they're so different and unique and beautiful, and just like, I don't know, it's amazing. But is there a significance to the butterflies for you? Like, I'm just curious how that kind of came about.
Well, really, that was another kind of moment where I wanted to paint something organic in between kind of like my cityscape paintings that I was working on at that point. And I had just happened to have a kind of a collection of, framed, butterfly specimens, basically.
Yeah.
And I was like, this could be a very cool, grid at my next gallery show. I had this idea where I wanted to have a bunch of little paintings that were kind of more accessible. You could buy a few at a time, or just one that's not going to be the most expensive piece at the show, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, what could that be? And I'm like, well, I could just try painting. I could just pin this butterfly to basically like a piece of paper and just see if I can just have some fun with it and see if that could be like a cool little like 6x6 piece that I could do a few of and make like just more of a bigger painting, but with a bunch of little paintings and make like a grid. And it started that way. So I bought more butterflies, and I tried to do like a different one with each grid. And it also became this challenge where it became like a warm-up exercise where they were 6x6. I gave myself 3 hours, and I said by, hour and a half, like 2 hours, by hour 2, like whatever it is, just finish it. You're not going to be noodling on this tomorrow or later on. Like this is a 3-hour alla prima challenge, and just see what happens. And it became so fun. And so like, all I wanted to do was like, it's this challenge of butterflies are so beautiful as is. Like they're so delicate. They're so perfect. Like, it's like one of the most beautiful creatures in the world. You're like, I wanted to paint it. Naturally, you want to paint every little bit of it because of its beauty. But I decided that I'm like, I wanted to make it more, to feel more kind of alive, and also, have like an energy about it. So I just decided to start trying this also as an experiment to get more abstract with it. So there was this challenge by like hour 2, I would have it almost fully painted and then mess it up and just scrape it and just like scrape away a wing and see what happens. And then like add this little and then like roll over it. And then it's like, okay, here's where you're at. You have 1 hour to complete what this is. And it was so fun to figure out. It was such a good like completing challenge, where you have to complete, finishing a painting is so hard to know when it's done, but it's like, it's when you give yourself time challenges, and then also when you're so far from like this being a perfect complete painting, it's kind of like, well, what does it need to be balanced? What does it need to feel finished? And so I started doing really that like kind of idea of I'm going to have this little grid of butterflies kind of like blossomed into this really cool warm-up exercise, and kind of like in between exercise that I would have between these big, huge, larger paintings that were taking weeks to paint, And so from there, since they were selling at my shows and galleries, I just bought more butterflies and kind of kept them as like a signature thing as I would do. And so I did bigger ones. And then finally, like for my animal show in Denver, I decided that I was going to take literally like some of these little 6x6 pieces that I did with all of the abstract marks, everything that like I had, the expression going on, and make them like 36x36 instead. And that was so fun and a whole other challenge. So I would have the butterfly actually pinned on my easel, and I would have the study there, and then try to kind of basically mimic the exact marks that I was able to make with like a little brush, but just big.
Yeah.
It was very cool. So like it kind of, it's really just been that's been it. I mean, because it started with this small collection and it's blossomed into, just really loving to paint butterflies. And then I've also brought them into my, they were a really great study to do at some of the workshops I've done, and some classes that I've taught in San Francisco to do these alla prima studies. So
yeah, That's awesome.
Mhm.
That's really cool. Talking about your process and where you mess up the painting, how did you come upon that concept and idea? How did that evolve in your work?
Well, it is just, if I think back, like, of course I've always loved kind of more impressionistic, I'd say, style of painting where you see the hand of the artist. It's not perfect, and there's something about it that gives it just more life, I guess, and so I think when I started, I was already just playing around with ways to mess up an edge or, kind of just get more loose, really.
Yeah.
And I swear, I think it was because of a moment of pure frustration where you just wipe everything off, of your painting. You're like, This is it, scrapping it. And I can't even put it away as is because it's so bad. I have to wipe it off and then put it in the drying rack,
Yeah.
And it was this series of kind of glass bottles, I think, that I had in a row. But a lot of the paint had already dried, so only some paint really just wiped off at that point.
Uh-huh.
And I put it away, and I'm like, I'm never looking at that thing again. And then it was months later, I was cleaning out my drying rack, and I found it in the back. And I remember thinking, now at this point, I had hours and hours and hours and hours more, experience painting. My eye had been seeing differently at this point, and I remember looking at this painting going this is actually very cool as is. The way that I accidentally wiped all this off, it made it these marks that it perfectly kind of put things in and out of focus. Yeah. And I remember going this is okay. I'm going to just kind of roll with this whole idea. And with that, then I started just experimenting with palette knife and kind of growing from there where what else can I put paint on with and take paint off with and just see kind of what happens and what mediums allow paint to dry quicker where it can kind of put a stain on versus some that take it completely away. Yeah. And playing with this idea. And the more I did it, the more I feel sometimes these things kind of start to happen and then you start to realize why you're so attracted to it or why it's so appealing. And I realized because it is in my head that this is how life kind of really is, where you have things in and out of focus, you have some things in your periphery, the single thing that you're looking at is nice and crisp, but everything else is kind of blurred objects, you know?
Yeah.
So I thought if I kind of just started to keep playing with that idea where, honing in on the focal point and actually making that more of a crisp edged kind of area and then taking other tools to make interesting marks as I put things in the background and blurred things away. Yeah. It kind of created this, I guess, just another variety of an impressionistic painting, sort of. So, it kind of went. It just kind of spiraled from there, I guess. Really, yeah.
And not to reference Bob Ross here, but kind of a happy accident, right?
Yes. I feel for me at least, not having honestly real formal training where you've had this intention and your painting turned out exactly how you wanted it because this was your goal from the beginning. I feel I've always stumbled into these going I don't know. I think I know what I want, but we'll see. Yeah. And then something happens along the way and you're okay, that is now the most important part of this painting. I'm going to try and work things around that, Yeah. And a tool, if I can say also, that I feel is really helpful for giving yourself a fresh pair of eyes instantly to see your art differently than what you've seen it as all day or all morning or however long you've been painting. Yeah. Is putting a mirror behind you and if you look back in the mirror, Yes, and you see it flipped and then double the distance. It's suddenly now that mark that you thought kind of messed everything up actually perfectly put like that, let's say for a cityscape, that row of houses in the background. And so that really helped me also with the kind of scraping away and putting paint on, and then having my mirror to kind of like look back and forth at, to get quicker with painting as well, because I realized there's a lot more I could leave as is because it was actually already working versus going back in and fixing it or noodling it until, you know, it looked right to me 3 feet away. But standing back, but then also looking at the mirror and flipping the image, it's suddenly now a whole new painting, and you're seeing it with a completely fresh pair of eyes. So that kind of helped also just like get more experimental, I think, with tools and those kinds of things as well.
Yeah, I love that. I utilize a mirror as well, and that's something that I teach very, very avidly to anybody. It's incredible what it does for our eyes. You know, when you're standing in front of a painting for a long time and you stop seeing it objectively.
Completely.
And to be able to look at it in the mirror and it flips it, and automatically you're objective. You can be way more objective. Is it working? And if it is, leave it alone.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Man.
Yeah.
I put a mirror in my studio really for because my studio was so tiny. I'm like, I'm doing everything I can to make this space look bigger, you know? I just kind of stumbled upon it, of course. I'm like, well, that worked out well. Yeah.
I probably am looking at my painting as I progress on my painting. I probably look at it more in the mirror than I do standing in front of it.
Yes. I will even I'll be putting a mark on and then basically figuring out where it's going to go as I'm looking in the mirror, and then the back. Absolutely.
Oh, that's hilarious. No, but yeah, the mirror is such a powerful tool.
It is.
I'm 100% on board with that. So thank you so much for sharing your process there. That's fascinating and exciting. I think hearing that, the freedom to kind of experiment and to play and to let things happen. You know, I paint pretty real. I would say your work is definitely pushing more of those abstract qualities than mine is. But I still feel like I'm reaching for similar results with the way I'm applying paint and getting textures and to me, something that I think about a lot is how can I express this part of the image in an interesting way that may not make sense, but if it works, it works.
Yes.
Like what can I get away with?
Yes.
Right? Yeah.
And I feel that comes, for me, it's come with, like everything, it comes with time. And the more you just inch forward a little bit more, you get away with this, then you can get away with this, then you can get away with this. And you're before you know it, you're oh, I would have never left that as much unfinished as 3 years ago as I did this time, because I feel like your eyes just continue to hopefully, mature as well and see things differently. And also I feel like new inspirations keep coming through and new influences. And, you kind of see someone else's art that's they barely painted that at all. And it's gorgeous. It's perfect. And it's of course, but it was all thought out. That was the plan, and you're they just left it. They just had the guts to leave it. So Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I try. I'm all trying to push it. And I feel like we each have there's you have a threshold, I think, of how messy you can actually leave things before you have to tighten it back up,
Right.
Figuring out where that is.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's really inspiring though, because I think I would like to push that more and to hear how you approach it where you get rid of so much almost where you lose it to the point where you're like, okay, I have to come back and bring it back and reestablish things. And to me, like, I think that would be really hard for me to dive in.
It's so hard. It's so hard. And I think that it really only happened because it was really out of a moment of frustration when I thought I was going to scrap it entirely.
Yeah.
But like, I feel like the wiping away completely sometimes in certain areas, it's like suddenly it's however you can make these moments in your painting feel less precious and the whole thing feel less precious, where it's more like malleable, and you know that like that was a beautiful thing that happened, and that was a gorgeous mark, good moment, but it's okay, it's gone, and this whole new thing happened, and like it's maybe not prettier, but it's equal, you know.
Yeah.
And like knowing that somehow I feel like that's a big thing that I've struggled with too. Like somehow making your art not as precious has helped me get more loose, you know? And I feel like most of us are always trying to kind of loosen up a little bit. And it's like, however you can do that, and scraping away things where you have to repaint it, it's like, it's helped me a lot. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's awesome. I want to kind of shift gears here now. You've done really well at social media, at least from what I can tell. And it looks like I'm assuming you obviously sell out of galleries, but you also sell out of your studio. Mm-hmm. How have you approached social media, and what have you found to be kind of the most important aspects of finding that success?
I'd say like, yeah. So this is I was thinking about this question too, because like I started before social media really became a thing. Like there was Facebook, you know, but like Instagram wasn't a big deal yet, or hadn't even started. And then I remember I had some artist friends who had joined, and they're saying like, you know, you really want to be on, there was a bunch of other, I forget now, like the different platforms that were happening at the time, but Instagram was kind of pushed on me, and they're like, you should start here because it's a great way just to see other artists and that kind of thing. But I started really late. I remember like I was like way behind when I jumped in on Instagram, but it just so happened at that time too. I mean, and we all know this, Instagram was a kind of a different thing than it is now, you know?
Yeah.
For sure. And there was a lot of, I remember anytime someone would reshare my work, or these kind of bigger pages that had, you know, multiple artists, you know, they would just share other people's work, not their own. Anytime they would share, you know, one of my images, I would get a bunch of new followers, and it kind of just started to grow from there. So I remember going, like, seeking those out in a sense to just try to push, so you just got more eyes on it, and then more people coming back to your page. So that worked for like a little while, you know, and then it's always like finding the new thing to kind of push it. But really, truly, what has helped with bringing collectors, I think, in and keeping them there has been my newsletter.
Okay.
And so like that I started before I had social media. I just had, whenever we had like shows at like any of my art communal spaces that I was working at, I would always just have like a piece of paper out, and people could write down their email. I just started my own little like handwritten sort of like mailing list. And then once social media became more of a thing, and then that you were collecting followers, then I would try and just direct people to join my newsletter as much as I could, because that way I feel like I was able to immediately start getting people who were actually interested in buying art versus just following your art, you know?
Yeah. Yep.
Right? To know when your shows actually were, or when you had available pieces, or that kind of thing. Because I had a lot of people so many times too will email me and say like, I didn't see that you posted this, and is it still available? And it kind of became a thing where I'm like, well, I also feel like it's my responsibility to let people know when art is available who really want to buy it. So
Yeah.
I try to make that more of a thing. And now it's great because it's kind of a weekly newsletter, and I update people just on shows or things that I'm doing, but also studio sales. So, like galleries are wonderful, and I always want to show with galleries, but they definitely take care of that on their end as far as like promoting the show, and they have a group of collectors that come for them, and which is excellent that a lot of the collectors are very loyal to some of these galleries and will only buy their art from specific ones.
Yeah.
And I didn't really realize it was a thing, but I totally understand it. So that kind of is hopefully going on kind of in the background. And I tried to create, in a sense, a similar thing with a kind of a mailing list newsletter where I could let people know, once a month I'm going to be having a group of small paintings for sale, and, here's where you want to, it's going to be on my website, here's how to join, and it starts at this time, that kind of thing. And I feel like that has helped a lot with the sales end of it, with making sure that I'm, I guess, like approaching people who want to buy art a little bit differently than just following art, and making sure that it's easy and accessible and, something they can do more often. And then with balancing then with getting eyes on art, I feel like we're all just still trying to like figure that out, like how,
Yeah.
and like,
absolutely.
There's an artist who I recently joined a like kind of group chat with, who she is really good at. She constantly learning like the new algorithms for Instagram, and like letting like in her newsletter, like I think it's every few weeks she'll let people know, like, hey, here's the new strategy, here's what you kind of want to work on, and more videos, more of this, like more engaging content, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so it's balancing that out, and it's also balancing out the like, we know we need to do this. We know as like self-employed artists, like you have to promote your own work. It is a part of the business. Like you absolutely have to. But it is like finding that balance of like, when does it become more distracting or, destructive in a way, because now you're so fixated on that.
Yep.
And so again, like I know other artists like I try to share my work in the morning, like before a certain time, a couple days a week, but I definitely kind of fall on and off the wagon with that, depending. Like, but now that I have a show coming up, anytime like I have something I'm trying to promote, I try to kind of ramp it up and get more video content and more pieces going and get that so we can get new people in to see it and promote the gallery. So yeah, it's tricky though.
Right. Yeah, it's an ever-changing beast.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So, so if you were, I ask this a lot to the other artists that I interview. If you had to start over and nobody knew who Lindsey Kustusch was, and you needed to get your art out there and make a living, what are things that you would do, marketing wise, in the digital world, whether it's social media, email, whatever, what would you do in the first month of getting started?
First, I think I'd really try and change my mindset about it, which I'm constantly trying to do. But the mindset of I'm bothering people by sending out a newsletter or promoting this or putting something else onto, Instagram that's like so crowded already. It's like somehow you're like, it's too much. I try and change that mindset way sooner than I did, where the successful advertisers, the people who are actually successful at advertising their business, don't care about those things. They just fill your inbox with emails. They fill your feed with their images, and that's what you're seeing. Like that is actually what's coming in. And that is something that's been really hard for me, where I'm like, I don't want to be too much, or even like, you want to have a little bit of like mystique. Like, you don't want to just show everything all the time, like there's a little bit of like, because I know I love that in life in general and in people. It's like, I don't necessarily need to know all about you because I love what you do. And that's a part of it. It's kind of the mystery behind it.
Yeah.
But trying to change that mindset a little bit, where you have to do more than you think that you're doing, which I'm still working on. And I don't know, I'd say like really like promoting the newsletter sooner than I started to really kind of ramp that up. I'd say getting that going, because I feel like social media is going to come and go, and there's going to be new platforms. Like already there's lots that are like artists are jumping over to,
Right. Yeah.
Off of Instagram, because it's changed so much. It's like, then you kind of have to start all over again. So getting something that's more certain and more sustainable and like concrete, that like you actually have full control over, I think is crucial. So like I would do that immediately. Like if you start like a Instagram page or a Cara page or something like that, it's like somehow finding, either making a website if you don't already have one, or getting something through your email where you can start kind of like a monthly, even if it's a monthly mass mailer where you send out things where like people can start to join, and that's when you can like promote everything that you're doing, really. So I'd say I'd start that sooner, and would definitely encourage that part of it. And then otherwise, it really is the mindset of, we just live in a world now where and if you want to be self-employed and you are doing all of your own promotion, like you have to make that a priority. So yeah, it's hard to say like specifically what I would do, but that's kind of the mindset of it, really.
Yeah. So when you're trying to promote your newsletter, what are some of the things that you've done on social media to try to promote that and to get people to sign up on your newsletter?
Well, really, like what really has worked well, that wasn't totally intentional, but has seemed to get people to move to my newsletter really well, is having my, let's say, monthly studio sales be accessible on my website, but only accessible like via like a password that you need to access the sale, or like have the first half an hour of the sale only accessible via a password, and then after that it's open to the public.
Okay.
I really started that because I had a lot of people emailing me after sales saying that like I was there right at 10 a.m. and I missed it, and and just anxious that like they didn't get there quick enough.
Right.
People who really wanted to buy something, and I was feeling so bad. I was like, I know we even had like communication before this, and I know how much you wanted a painting, but you just missed that like second when the one you wanted was scooped up. So what I started to do was have really the first half an hour of my sales only accessible for people who are already on my newsletter, who are very interested, who have been interested, and can access it through a password. And then they jump on. Yeah. And they usually, a lot of times, most things will go within that first half an hour. And then after that, then it's open to the public. And then I'll kind of push it on the social media side saying, I have a studio sale that's now up. And then those people who aren't quite as serious will then maybe come in and buy a piece. And that has helped people move over to the newsletter. And then through the newsletter, it's like, again, thinking about it in a way of not necessarily how is this engaging, but like what are they benefiting from opening this up every Thursday? So potentially like early access to sales, which is great. Also maybe early access to like an online workshop, or new videos that you just put out that hasn't been promoted yet to the public, or other things where for a while I was experimenting with just kind of like making it more of a blog too, where I kind of just give little bits of insight and tips and those kinds of things, where here's like your weekly like tip on like how to use the color green and like this or whatever, and like that kind of thing. And kind of really depends on like what I had time for also, but that seemed to help people stay on the newsletter, and to get them there was like somehow you had to kind of open it up in order to access something that was only available if you opened up the newsletter. So
Yeah. So some exclusive benefits and perks to being a part of it.
Exactly. Yeah. For sure.
That's awesome. That's really great food for thought, and that can get the creative juices flowing for all of us artists who are trying to, maximize the quality of what we're doing.
It is. Yeah.
Yeah. I would say my newsletters are they're pretty much just informative about maybe an upcoming show. And how often are you putting out a newsletter?
So for a while, when I first started, I would try to do it like once a month. But then I remember I had somebody at a gallery show approach me, and she said that she was part of my newsletter, but she never seen it or hasn't seen it in a while or something like that. And I'm like, oh, well, I try to send them out, like monthly, so you should hopefully be getting one soon. And then she was basically, in a way, like comparing me to other artists that were sending them out more frequently, and how much more useful that was. Like, oh, well, I get this person's newsletter every week, and that has, like, that's helped me because I know, like, I was able to buy a piece or something like that, And I remember just thinking at the time, like, oh, yes. Okay, this should be a more frequent thing, because even if you don't always have something to promote, you're still active in someone's inbox, basically, So I was doing it every week. Like, I was trying to. The last few weeks, I've had some trips I've gone on, and I haven't really sent one out, but I try to do it every Thursday and send out a newsletter. And even if you don't have anything big going on or any new paintings going on, I'll try and maybe promote some older paintings that are still at galleries, or I don't know if you know, but my husband Nate and I also have a YouTube channel where we started our plein air, kind of filming our plein air videos.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, not filming our plein air, sessions, and making videos of them. We started doing that while we were in London, so most of them are kind of like us traipsing around London during the pandemic and, like, painting outside.
Yeah.
So it's really fun. And so I'd promote something like that or put that in the newsletter. So try to make it kind of different each week, but also making sure that certain things are, like, if you're promoting something, that's always in it as well. So in case someone didn't get last week's, they're getting it this week's, and that in November this show's coming up, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I mean, really, it's like, otherwise I'd say, like, I would think at least once a month, if you just want to, like, send out, like, a list of here's what's coming up, kind of a thing,
Yeah. That's really helpful. So how, as I hear about all the things that you're doing, it sounds like, you're obviously spending a lot of time painting. You're recording at least some of the processes for a social media newsletter. You're writing a newsletter. You're posting on social media. How do you find the balance? How do you organize your time so that you're effective at all of those things, rather than just, to me, I feel like it would be really easy just to dabble in all of those things and not get a lot done and kind of flounder.
Absolutely. And I was thinking about this before our chat, just thinking about like what have been some of the biggest challenges too, as like just as an emerging artist and also as like an established artist.
Yeah.
It is time management. It is like, you kind of have all the time in the world and then no time at all,
Yeah.
Most of the time. Because you're like, I don't technically have to clock in, but there's 8 million things that I have to do this week to really, like, benefit my career and get the things out there. And that is so challenging. But I'd say, like, trying to find like certain days of the week where you do this certain thing no matter what has helped. So like my newsletter, once I started making that an every Thursday thing, then I would either write the newsletter like Thursday morning or do that like as a Wednesday night after painting thing and have it mostly done, and then maybe kind of do some last minute things Thursday morning, and then basically send that out by like 10 a.m. or something. And I just kind of started with that, like that with the newsletter on that day, making that more of a scheduled thing. And I feel like that is a very helpful thing to do when you have it. It's helped me kind of also schedule other things too, like in the same way. Social media, it's like, really that's like by the end of the week, I hope I've done at least 3 or 4 posts kind of thing, and usually in the morning, and then just depends on the day, you know? But like back when I was living in San Francisco, it was nice to just kind of get out of the studio, of course, and like get out into the world. So then I would make it a like, okay, on this day, this full day, I'd bring my laptop out and do like all of like my like email kind of busy work, figuring out show dates, getting back to people, that kind of thing. Really all in like a big long afternoon session where I just sit at a coffee shop and just kind of bang it all out. And then kind of the rest of it is like responding, you know, and maintenance kind of throughout the week. And then next week would come and I'd have a single day where I just kind of get it all out and then come back. And then so I wouldn't have to always put in kind of, in a sense, busy work with painting necessarily. Yeah. Like I remember there was a time where in my head, I was like classifying it as like, I had like clean days and then like dirty days. And clean day was like, all I had to do was paint. I'm like, that's it. I don't have to get back to anybody. I don't have to go anywhere. Like I'm just painting. It's like the cleanest you can get. And then all the way to like a very dirty day. I'm like, there's a million things I have to do today, but I have to get them done. Like this lineup of clean days, you know? Yeah. And it was kind of finding a balance that way. And like, and I'm so old school where like, I don't use like tech for a lot of things, especially my calendar. And I have like a giant, basically like desktop calendar that I've like, but I have it up as like the full year, like on my wall. Oh, and wow. I have, where I have it all like in a sense, like color coded. So like I have shows in a certain color, like deadlines in a certain color. Yeah. So, you know, so I know immediately like, okay, well, I only have 3 weeks until I have to get an image to a gallery to promote the show that's still not like till 5 months from now, but they need it for a magazine or something like that. So every single day I'm seeing how much time for me visually immediate, like how much time I have like to get these things done. And then that week I kind of prioritize what needs to happen in order to get to the next week and that kind of thing. But like, I feel like managing your time as like someone who's self-employed it's a big learning curve of like what actually works for you. Yeah. You know? Yeah, absolutely. I'm, you know, now that I've started the podcast and I'm trying to paint and also create, you know, online courses and all that, you know, it is crazy how challenging it is when you add something new into your work. It just like, it kind of disrupts everything else that's going on. And you have to, and you have to reorganize and refigure it out. And it can be a massive learning curve, just like you said. Massive. And I remember there was a moment, oh gosh, speaking of like organizing, you know, like in working on online classes and those kinds of things, there was a time in San Francisco, I mean, looking back, it's like, I'm so grateful that I had all of these opportunities, but it was a moment where I just said yes to absolutely everything. And there was so much on my plate. I remember I was teaching like a weekly class. Then I had a week-long workshop that I was planning for. And then also painting for a show that was happening like very soon. I remember like it was like crunch time already, where I had to like, things had to be finished daily in order for me to actually get nearly enough pieces done for the show. And then paint for the workshop to get that prepped, and then do my weekly Saturday classes. And I remember just like, that was the first time I had to kind of like go, okay, there's so much you have to do. Like, there's so much that's like just equal priority. It's all here, you know? Yeah. But I remember going like, this is the first time I really tried to like challenge my brain to go, okay, you will have time for that. You're going to schedule, like, all you really need is, let's say, telling myself 4 hours to like plan that class or something that day, whatever, that Saturday class.
Yeah.
Okay. You'll find that 4 hours. Right now you have to finish this painting in order for this other one to get started. So that 4 hours is going to come in like tomorrow afternoon, and you are going to, that's the time you're going to set that time aside and actually figure out your class. And it helped me like weirdly like compartmentalize and go like, you will get this done. It doesn't all have to happen now, but just know that like, here's the time that you have coming up, and here's where you can kind of plug that in, you know? And what I find tricky is when you have a little bit more free time and it's not as like crunched, where that's when I start to kind of slide off and go like, well, or I don't do that tonight, and I just like do a little online shopping instead. You know, it's like, it's like, I feel like that's where I start to kind of fall when I'm not fully loaded up, and you have to like almost like section out each hour of the day. It's like, I really only have to get that done by like next week. So I'm like, yeah, I'll do some gardening instead. So I'm trying to like get that these days, you know, but it's tricky.
No, it is. And it is funny. I feel like the problems arise, just like you said, it's more when I'm not super scheduled, or I don't have the structure like I should. Then it's really easy for other things to slide in and distract and keep me from being productive. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
For sure.
This is great conversation, Lindsey.
Oh, good. Oh, God.
This is valuable stuff. You know, I'm thinking I want to shift gears a little bit more here. Galleries are a big part of your success as an artist. And I would love to hear about gallery experiences, or, you know, maybe even just advice around maintaining good gallery relationships, and what they should expect from you, and also vice versa, what you should be expecting from them. Please elaborate on some of that for us.
Absolutely. So galleries have definitely been like a critical part of my career. Because again, like I was saying, that was kind of something I started with that I didn't necessarily know I wanted to do until I was kind of just saying yes to all of these shows, and then realized, oh, this is something that I can do and want to do. And was the only real way to get your work out there and be seen and actually sell your art. So galleries before and now, where you can promote a lot of your stuff just via social media.
Yeah.
So I'd say, like, in general, it's good to sometimes like do a little bit of like sleuthing to see if like this gallery, let's say if you're approached by a gallery, or even if you're looking out there for galleries and you're kind of doing your own research, it's like first to see what kind of art they're selling, you know, and like meaning like not necessarily quality, but like if it's all abstract and you paint very realistic, maybe you'd have collectors that will be collecting that, but most likely probably they're selling abstract because that's what sells, you know, in their situation and in their town, or, you know, or what they want to promote basically. So I think that's a big one. It's like seeing what the gallery, what kind of artists they have and what kind of art they're already selling, and where it is in the world too. I think that could be a factor as well. Like, it was really nice to have local galleries because you could go there, you could talk to them in person, you could see the art on the walls. you could see how they honestly like approach you as you walk into the gallery. Like if they're welcoming and friendly and excited about the art, or if they're just, like you don't get any sort of reaction at all and you're just been in there for 15 minutes and no one said a word to you,
Right.
you go, well, maybe you're not really going to be pushing my art if I give this to you. And I want to make sure that's a thing.
Yeah.
So local is great for that. But now I think that's trickier and trickier depending on where you live and who you're approached by, So like currently I have one, I don't really have any local galleries. I'm still with San Francisco. I have one in Denver. I show on the East Coast and for a while up in Seattle. And I'd say so if you can't do that, then seeing what kind of art they're selling and if yours would kind of mesh well with that. Price range, I think, is a big deal. If they're able to sell very expensive art and yours is pricier, then you know that, okay, this is something that is a potential. There's other galleries where it's like they kind of cap off at maybe a certain price range, but yours is selling for more. Then most likely maybe the collectors there aren't going to be buying more expensive art.
Yeah.
I mean, you never know, but it does seem that way, just through my history,
Yeah.
So like I kind of, and then what I love about galleries and truly expect from galleries as well is a place for your art to hang that's outside of your own studio where people can come see it in person, and I know most people do still just buy online, but I feel like even if you're not buying art, to have a place to go to see this art in person should always be a thing, and I'm always going to promote it. And I feel like it's no matter what. I would love to still be part of galleries for that reason alone. But also they usually have a massive client list or a collector list that you don't have access to.
Right.
So, so like when you give them your art, I know, oh man, like I've had some galleries that have just been so wonderful, and they will email specific people going like, I have a new painting in and it's exactly what you love and here it is, and they'll just buy it on the spot because they know their collectors.
Yeah.
They know what they're looking for, and so to have that kind of access is really nice. And so that's also why I like it, is like you can give a gallery a collection of paintings and kind of have that kind of burning in the background and letting them do the work and sell your work and get to their collectors while you're kind of working on your own projects as well.
Yeah.
So I expect them to definitely promote my work in that way and make sure that you do have your art hanging as well. And they're not just collecting it, because that can be a thing too where, great, give us some pieces, but then they'll just tuck it away and you're never up on display. It's like that is also kind of the whole point, where it's like, otherwise I would just be selling out of my studio. Like I want to make sure it's out,
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. So, and then on the other hand, as far as like what I feel like has been expected of me as a gallery artist, it's, I'd say I want to say consistency, where you are able to give them work like frequently, so they can kind of keep your name up and about and like a buzz where like you always have a little bit of your work in their gallery that they can promote. It kind of becomes a part of like their collection of artists.
Yeah.
So there was a time where I had taken on just too many galleries. I just, there's all the years of just saying yes until I realized I have to start saying no,
Yep.
And so many things going on that I wasn't able to really fulfill anybody's requests, and it's like, well, I can give you one, but I can't give you one until 4 months from now, that kind of a thing. So I think it's knowing that they're going to be asking for art. If your art is selling, they're going to be constantly asking for it, because this is the whole point. This is the business, so it's like, you want to make sure you have art to give them so that you stay current as well in their gallery. And then some will be helpful, I'd say, with pricing. Otherwise, it's like you kind of have to have that somewhat established, Thankfully, again, I started with a gallery, who helped me through every step of the way. So the gallery owner helped me with like pricing my work for the first time. And then as it would sell, what we should potentially bump it up to. And I remember for a while, it was like every time I'd have a few pieces sell or a successful show, then, okay, next time your work comes through, we'll tack another 10% on and just see how that goes. And then see how that goes. And then if it keeps selling, we can kind of keep increasing until you kind of find a point where like, okay, I feel like I've balanced out where things aren't flying off the walls, but they're not sitting around for forever. Yeah. And you kind of find a little bit of a happy medium. And so that gallery was really great with just helping me, kind of coach me through just how to become a gallery artist, really. Yeah. And everyone else since then, in a way, I was almost expecting that to happen. So like, as I approached other galleries or they approached me, but really a lot of them wanted you to kind of be more self-sufficient. So it was like, they're like, just name a price and that's what it is. Like, no feedback, like, doesn't matter, whatever you want. It's like, oh, okay, I'll say this price and we'll just see how it goes,
Yeah, yeah.
And so it's like, there is that too, because they're dealing with a ton of artists all the time, and some of these galleries, some that I show with have, hundreds. So it's like, you kind of have to be, as you would in any other job, competent and like, not competent, sorry, but like self-efficient, where like, you're just, you are giving them things on time. You have a price already set. You have title. You have like your file name, right? Things, everything to make it easier for them.
Yeah.
I remember getting coached on that too early on, where I was just sending my images over and I had the title and my name on it. And then they emailed me back and they're like, here's how we want your, like, basically like to go in the file name so it could be organized correctly in our system. And I'm like,
right.
Oh, didn't know that was a thing. Okay. So now it's like, that's just what I do for everyone from here on out, because like that's, and I'd say like now too, depending on the gallery, like some are really good and big with like promoting on social media. Others maybe don't need to necessarily, or just haven't really pushed it, but I'd say like, I've now been asked more to give them like video content, which I have never been, like, I wasn't used to before.
Wow.
And it was like, yeah, like, it's cool. I'm glad that like I have somebody pushing me to like do more of that, and it's like, well, you have a show coming up and they're going to need some kind of like, even if it's not the full painting, it's just snippets of you in the studio doing stuff and like some sort of promotional video. Yeah. And those things. So I feel like a little bit more expected by some of them as well. But like overall, I'd say like, if you've kind of like done your own kind of research as far as like like the artists they have, the what they're selling, where they're selling it, and like have like a good conversation with them, and things feel legit, it's like, just give it a shot and then just see how it goes. Like, that's kind of what I've done with all of them. And some have worked out perfectly, like they couldn't be better. Like, I want them always in my life. And others are like, we need to break up. I think this relationship needs to come to an end, depending. But again, it's like, just really feeling it out and who you can mesh well with together, and who's really helping your business as well as theirs, I think is big too. Yeah. But it's a relationship that benefits each other. So if they're promoting it well, they're making business, and if you are doing that as well for them, it's a win-win for everybody.
Yeah, so. And that's how it should be. The mutually beneficial aspect needs to be there.
Yes.
And there's been times when I've worked with galleries and I feel like I've given some, galleries a shot, but not really given them a ton of work because I've been spread too thin. And
Yeah.
it wasn't necessarily their fault, but it was more on my end. It's like, you know what, this just isn't something that can work for me right now.
Right.
And I think being able to have communication, open communication, honest communication with the people who run the gallery is so absolutely important.
So
Right.
so important. And also just kind of like I've noticed, just I try not to get too wrapped up in it, but like how they treat you as well, you know, like
Yeah.
if there's respect on the other side, because I feel like I don't know if that's a reflection on how they're treating their collectors as well, but it's like if you're not feeling respect, I don't know how you're potentially treating other people who are coming in who are going to be buying my work, and if it's just even a good situation, you know.
Yeah.
That's why it's also like, God, if you could go there in person, it really does make a huge difference. But if you can't, then it's phone conversation no matter what, and then feeling that out, and then just kind of looking around online and just seeing what, you know, their collection really.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that caveat there with feeling that respect. And I think I've run into different galleries where they approach me, or we have some kind of connection, and usually things are pretty positive, you know, and respectful. And then somewhere along the lines, it shifts, and it almost becomes this power play where they, like, I don't know what it is. It's like they have this ego that they want you to be. I don't know. I felt like I've been less than, you know, and it's like they try to put me under their thumb, whereas it's like, no, we need to have a mutually respectful and beneficial relationship here, and if we can't have, you know, real communication, and even for me, it's like there's negotiation that I think is, like, when you're talking about you know, different commission price, you know, or percentages and things like that. You know, you've got to be able to you know, represent yourself and fight for what you need, you know.
Absolutely. Because
Go ahead.
yeah, because they're taking a percentage, and so really it's a matter of like, do you feel like this business has earned that percentage based on like maybe what you're doing on your side versus what they're doing, and also like how you are treated and what you are to them. Yeah, there is that negotiation too, and most of the galleries that I've been with have had kind of like a real set kind of like split that seems to kind of always be the same. It's like, let's say 50-50 or 60-40 or something like that, you know? Yeah. And then I had been with one that was, basically they said, like, you just tell us how much you want for the painting and we'll make sure that you get that. And I remember going like, I was so young and I'm like, okay, well, that works for me as long as like I'm getting what I feel like I deserve, how do you even know when you're first starting out? Like, I don't know the value of this yet, you know, I have no idea.
Yeah.
Like $1 million or like $2. I don't know. And like, I remember going to that gallery and seeing that the price tag that they put on it was so much more than I had asked for.
Yeah.
And they were selling it. And I'm like, it was a real hard lesson. Like, it was like, okay, you have to do a lot more, you have to have a big conversation before on what's going to go down no matter what. And then also, like, if they think that they can sell your work for this much more, then you need to be asking for that much more. And that split needs to be somewhere more in the middle. Yeah. So I'd say, like, I haven't had that experience a lot with galleries as far as like whenever we've discussed pricing, but like, it has come up. And so it's, you just want to make sure that you are definitely like aware of what's going on and agree with it, you know. Right. And then most of the time I feel like they're flexible going forward as far as like, if you want to raise your prices, and even though they're going to have to raise the overall price, they're still going to get their percentage, and you can get the percentage that you feel is the value of it, you know.
Yeah. So speaking about pricing, What are some of the kind of the go-to fundamentals of pricing your work that you've kind of figured out over the years? How do you approach that?
I'd say, like, again, this was something that kind of started as a let's just throw a price tag on it, see what happens, and then work it out from there, you know? So
Yeah.
like when I started, like I was saying, they were $50 and then they went up 10% and then 10% and then 10%. And I remember a few years down, I was actually able to like not just break even, you know, like with art supplies,
Right.
you know,
Yeah.
and rent. And not even just rent, because at that point I was, you know, living with my husband. So like we were both sharing rent. I mean, really it was just art supplies and other things where I'm like, it's finally like the percentage has gone up enough where I'm actually starting to make like a few dollars here and there. It was amazing. So yeah, it was starting with some sort of a price that's the trickiest bit. It's like, if you have yet to price your work, like where do you begin?
Yeah.
And I'd say like, it's like knowing your value, knowing your worth, but also like doing your research to know kind of where you are amongst your peers and maybe even in this particular gallery or just in general. And I remember like advice I was given too early on was like, not only are people paying for like the artwork, the painting itself, but also a lot of people are investing in like your name, which I didn't realize was a thing, you know? And I'm like, oh, so even though like, okay, this could be the most amazing painting you've ever painted, it's like you're still not known technically. So maybe a collector is not going to pay that particular price for it because it's not an investment, you know, but that's not everybody. That's just some, you know?
Right.
So it was not going over, but also not going under. So I started really low. And then since then, it's kind of been I'd increase it with every like collection of paintings that I'd put out there. Every like 10% I'd go up and then keep feeling it out. Things are selling. Okay, great. Keep going up. Then I kind of hit this medium where things are selling, but now I'm getting more of the feedback of, I love your painting, but it's too expensive for me. It's like, okay, so we're kind of in a pocket where like they're still affordable, but they're not dirt cheap, you know?
Yep.
And so then from there, I kind of do by like, in a way, square inch and then like complexity of the piece itself.
Okay. Yeah.
So sometimes like Cityscapes, I will charge more for because they just simply take me longer. They've taken me longer to learn too. I think that's something you have to incorporate where it's not just the length of time that, at least for me, I mean, I can't speak for everybody, like the length of time it took you to paint this painting. Like let's say my butterflies are alla prima and I try to do them in a few hours, but I have also spent 8 years learning how to do that in a few hours.
Exactly.
You know? So it's like, how do you find your value there? And so I still go with like general complexity, how long it takes me to paint the painting, but also how long it's taken me to learn how to paint the painting, and then size, you know. So obviously as it gets bigger, the square inches, I'll kind of tack on a certain percentage, or say like it's however much per square inch for a cityscape. So at this size, it would be this amount or something.
Yeah.
And I had to do that to find some sort of strategy when I was working with, when I was starting to do more commissions, like years back, in finding some sort of strategy to figure out how to, like, to price a potential piece that someone was asking for. So, so then I kind of had like a couple different lists where it's like animal work versus cityscapes versus butterflies. Here's where the base price is. And then depending on like what was requested to add into the piece, other elements, those kinds of things, that I would add on a certain percentage to like accommodate that amount of time, you know? And so again, I feel like that's a big learning curve, but you kind of just have to throw a price out there. And if it's not too low, not too high, I don't know, somewhere in the middle, somewhere where you feel comfortable, and then take it from there, you know?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
A couple of things that I typically consider when I'm early on, I don't remember even who taught me, but it was basically that my price per square inch is higher with smaller paintings, and as they get bigger, the price actually does go down. So as they get bigger, it actually is the square inch price is more affordable. But it when you have a flat square inch fee, those big paintings get really expensive really quick. Yeah, right. So I have kind of a curve that I have established, and then if I'm painting something, that's kind of, so I create I've actually had a spreadsheet made where it basically figures out all that for me with the curve that over the years I've established. But then if I have something that I'm doing that's a lot more complex, that's taking more time, I then I'll add on a percentage to compensate for the time factor and complexity. So that's how I approach it. Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much the same way. Exactly. Like, and I remember that advice I was given too early on of like, as the size increases, like you can't keep the same amount per square inch if you're doing it that way.
Right.
But then like recently I've had some commission requests where like they want an enormous painting and there's a lot in it. So I'm like, this is going to be more closer to some of my like smaller painting, price per square inch cost.
Yeah.
It would be that size. Like if it's all negative space, then sure, but I'm like, oh, you want a crowd scene? Oh, okay. That's going to be a lot.
Right. Absolutely.
More.
Yeah. And then to go on, with commissions and I think with the commission, it's all about negotiation. And managing expectations.
Yes.
Because these people have specific requests, they have specific things they're looking for. And to me, if I'm doing a commission, it's taking me away from my normal work. And so I tack on at least a little bit of a percentage just to do a commission, because it's removing some of my artistic freedom and license, it's kind of giving away some of the creative factor. So it's a lot of stuff to consider.
It is a lot of stuff to consider. And I don't know, I can only speak for myself, but it's like also like gaining the confidence over the years that like your work is actually worth this value that you're putting a price tag on. It's interesting. It's like, I think maybe some people start out with like, it's $1 million and that's what I'm worth. Like, I wish I'd give $1 million to be that way, like, no, like, I will do this for free. And they're like, you should probably charge me something. Like, okay, $10. And so it's like, to slowly build on that has, for me, it's been a big challenge of like, no, look at the time that you're putting into this. Look at the time you put already into this, to build these skills and, this kind of name that you have and work and body of work that you've made, to like, that is worth something, because art is very special and it's very special and unique to the person. And when you're an art lover and an art collector, it's people, they don't mind spending that amount because it brings them that much joy. In their lives. And I have to like remind myself that too. It's not just about me and the art that I'm making. This is truly for somebody else to like have and to give them inspiration or remind them of a memory or something else. It's not, even though it feels very like, it's very personal, but it feels very almost selfish sometimes. It's really, you are giving your gift out to the world. and to like remember that is something that I try to do, and I feel like that helps me get through times when you just want to quit or whatever. And it's like, this is also when you get feedback like that, it's a reminder that like this is also because you're giving someone joy, as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I find that to be so valuable. When a collector will send me a picture of the painting on their wall, and where it's at, and I love that. And when they randomly reach out and say, "Hey, we just love your art," and remembering that somebody is looking at this painting somewhere, and
Yes.
and getting joy and positive vibes from on a regular basis, it means a ton. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think I want to kind of wrap things up here, but I would love just a couple things. First off, if with this episode, if somebody was just listening to this part of the episode, and this is all they got out of it, what would you want them to get out of this episode? What would be the biggest reason for them to listen to the rest of this, and what would you hope that they might get out of this?
I mean, really, I would say, and this is just advice for any artist, any painter, is just have to get up and paint. Try to stop putting like rules and barriers and reasons why today's not the right day, tonight I can't do it because of these reasons. It's like, you just have to ignore all the excuses and just paint. And like, inspiration will come and go. Lots of times you won't be inspired. Like, so many times I go into a session and I'm not inspired at all. I don't want to be painting today. I want to be outside in the sunshine, like not in my studio.
Yeah.
But I say I'm going to give myself an hour and just feel it out. And then usually within that hour, something happens. Some moment happens when I'm painting where I'm like, oh, this is it. That was gorgeous. Keep going with it. And then sooner or later, now you're just in the flow. Yeah. And I think for me, it's like, if I were to tell anybody like anything, it's you just have to get up and paint and try to either eliminate excuses or do things in your environment to help you just get there quicker. And then let the inspiration come and go. And because you're going to find it as you move along, but you're not going to find it if you just stand still and just only observe, like you're going to have to get dirty and get messy and just know that like, it's not precious. You're going to paint hopefully 1 million paintings in your lifetime. And this is just one. So just do it, just try it, have fun, and just play. I think that's also such an important part where we get so wrapped up in the skill behind it. But like, truly, art should be fun. And I encourage playing with it and finding the joy in why you love painting. So that's kind of what I would say, I guess.
I love that. Yeah. I love that. That's huge. Cool. Why else would we be painting if we didn't love it, right?
I know, right? And it's just so easy to like get wrapped up in like, because anything that's a challenge, you're gonna love and hate. There's just gonna be this blend constantly. But overall, if you're just like, you could just get so much out of it, and like it's so rewarding. You have to push through those like times when you just don't want to do it or you don't think you're good enough to get back to the moment where like you had a little bit of fun, because like that's all that's worth it just for that, Yeah. And that you made this thing out of nothing. Like that's what I love most about painting. You created something out of nothing, which is cool. Mm-hmm.
So if there was any piece of advice that you could give yourself, go back in time like 10, 15 years, is there anything that you would go and tell yourself?
I would say, have more confidence. Truly. Like you start out with nothing. At least I didn't. Just like try to be more confident right off the bat. But also like, I just have to mention like another like piece of advice that I just think about all the time was given to me by my first gallery, by the gallery owner. And I remember I'd sold some paintings and I went in there to collect my check. I'm like, going to the bank. This is amazing. And she's like, and remember on my way out, she's like, okay, so are you going to give me more paintings? I'm like, yes, just have to get to it. And she's like, okay, paint faster. And I'm like, paint faster? Like, how am I supposed to paint faster? What are you talking about? Like, I am painting as fast as I can. And I realized, like, at that time, that was such a bigger piece of advice than, like, I could have ever considered. Like, truly at that moment, yes, I think there was lots of things I could have done and started to do from there on out that made the process of painting faster. So, like, maybe the preliminary sketches, like I switched to Photoshop entirely and I don't really do any sort of like pencil to paper sketches at all.
Yeah.
Like I mostly do everything digitally first so I can just make quick changes, quick color adjustments, you know, those kinds of things where you can see it instantly.
Photoshop is so powerful.
Oh, so powerful.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I'm like such a huge promoter of it. So like shaving off some minutes there or some hours there and then really in the painting process itself. So it's like, okay, maybe try finding some faster drying mediums that help you get to your next layer quicker, where it doesn't have to sit in the drying rack for as long, you know?
Right.
So like if you want to paint on a dry layer of paint, try, like I use Gamblin solvent-free liquid, which is like basically a painting medium that helps with quick drying, but also helps just kind of like, you know, thin your paints out. Okay. So those kinds of things, like trying to include that. So I kind of, at that point, interpreted in that way, where like the actual act of painting I needed to do faster, which was true because she wanted more paintings because they were selling and you got to strike while the iron's hot. So I'm like, I will do that. But then what I realized also what that was is that at that point, and still, it's like I hate to say it, but like quantity is almost more important right now than like every piece being perfect. Yeah. And like an absolute masterpiece or the best thing that you've ever done. It's like, no, like these, like your paintings right now are selling as is. So like you need to paint more of them. So you continue to put hours in the studio, more experience. Your skill will grow as you put those hours in. And in the meantime, you're putting your work out there to be seen by more eyes. So it was almost like paint faster, meaning like just bulk. Right now, we just want quantity and you've got a place to put them. And until like you can get your pieces to a price point where they're actually sustaining you and you don't have to sell 1 million paintings, it was really about that, where the more paintings I sold, the more art supplies I could buy, or now I can finally pay my rent, or, you know, I can afford this and like quit my full-time job, basically, was like the whole goal. So it was kind of getting over that little bit of confidence at the beginning and also ego to know that like this isn't going to be perfect every single time. But really, the more you do it and the more you make, hopefully the more chance you're going to have to actually make this into a lifelong, you know, profession. Yeah. And so I realized like that little bit of advice of like just paint faster was like huge, you know? Yeah. It's crazy. So I'd say that as advice, you know? Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. Yeah. And I do agree that the more paintings you can get through, to me, it's just there's no way around the learning curve with art. Right. But to me, starting and finishing a painting, you learn a lot in that process, and then going on to the next. And so, every painting you're learning and you're growing. And so the faster you can paint, the faster you can get through paintings. Yeah. Yeah. The faster that learning curve can go. That's awesome. That is awesome. Yeah. Cool.
Hey, Lindsey,
Yeah,
this has been such a wonderful conversation, and I feel like we could just keep going.
So great.
Yeah. But
Sure.
thank you again so much for your time and for sharing your experiences and a lot of the ins and outs of what you do.
Yeah.
I guess that's going to be it today for the podcast, everybody. So make sure you tune in next week, and happy painting.
Thank you so much again.
Thank you so much for listening to the Business of Art podcast. If you're interested in resources and education to help you successfully create art and then sell it, please check out the Business of Art course in the link below. Thanks again for listening. We'll see you in the next episode.